Hey there, this is James with Moonify Mineral, and today we're going to be talking about tumbling your own rocks. Rock tumbling is a rather prolific hobby. It's been around for a long time, and if you're unfamiliar with it, it's effectively mimicking the process of what happens to stones naturally in a stream over time. We're going to take some rough stones, we're going to put them in this tumbler, and it's going to make them round and smooth, or at least more smooth and polished, like these bad boys right here. Hopefully like these bad boys right here. So I'm going to give you some tips and tricks to get started, and over the next several weeks we're going to be checking in on the stones and seeing how they're coming along. I'm going to do this bit by bit with you, but this is the first part, getting started. So different tumblers will look differently. That's okay. This is a 3-pound tumbler barrel, and I have before you some various agates. These are some Montana agates, as well as some agates that came out of the Mississippi or Missouri River. I'm not sure. I didn't pick those ones up myself, but they look like the stuff I get out of the Mississippi. Little river-worn agates that came out of Montana and Wyoming. Let's see, this is one that was dug in Montana or Wyoming. I've also got some pieces of geodes, some nice little chunky bits. So the first tip that we're going to talk about here is hardness. When you are tumbling stones, you always want things to at least be the same general hardness. Now, what do I mean by that? Rocks are categorized under what's called the Mohs scale of hardness. It's effectively a scale of 1 to 10 that allows you to determine how hard something is by comparing it to other common items. For instance, say an iron nail or steel nail, or your own fingernail or something like that. You always want stones to be the same general hardness. In this case, I have agates and quartz geodes. Agate and quartz, right there in that 7, 7.5 range, they'll be the same hardness. So what happens if you put, say, something really soft in with something hard? Well, the really soft thing is going to be dissolved or eroded away, and the hard thing is not going to wear down very much. So that's key number one. Research and have the same general hardness. So what are some common things that you could put in together? So agates, jaspers, quartz, petrified wood, chalcedony, all of these silicate minerals work really, really well together. You could also, say, throw in various feldspars together. You could theoretically throw in feldspars with, or at least if they were very hard, solid, unweathered feldspars, you could throw those in with, say, your quartz. But feldspars like labradorite, moonstone, larvicite, those could all go in together. Fluorite, you would generally want to tumble only with fluorite. If you're unsure of the hardness or something, always do the same type of material. Now let's carry on. Let's fill this puppy up and get to the next point. Different sizes of material are perfectly okay. In fact, it's generally pretty well regarded to have different sizes of materials. You want a good varied mix because it'll give you a more evenly rounded polish. That is from Mexico. Anyway, that's a pretty one. You want varying sizes because as you tumble, they're all going to get a little bit smaller. But the next point when you are filling out your tumbler is you want it at least 3/4 of the way full. And my general rule of thumb is 3/4 of the way full. Okay, let's make sure this is... Let's take a little bit out. Yeah, at least 3/4 of the way full. As consistently as you can through the tumble. So that's a pretty good fullness right there. Why 3/4 of the way full? So say you have only a couple of items in, or say the tumbler gets down to less than half. As this tumbler rotates, as you saw at the beginning, those rocks will come up and they will fall down, and you're more likely that they will chip. You won't get a consistent polish because you need them to be rubbing together. So for all these stages, I like to keep the barrel around 3/4 of the way full. Now, as you tumble, these stones will be rubbing against each other. They're going to be getting smaller. And you'll notice, as we go, that they get smaller and smaller and smaller, and the amount filled in the barrel will become less and less and less. So how do we combat that? I'll skip ahead. I usually run 2 parallel groups together and then combine them as we go further on. Pardon me. You know what? No, we need some more small pieces in that. I was wrong. Just a few more small pieces. Yeah, that's more like it. But yeah, so we want all the stones in there rubbing against each other. We don't want them beating against each other. We want them rubbing together. Like I said, this mimics what happens in a stream naturally over time. Alright, this bad boy's filled up. So what's the next part? That's right, we're mimicking what happens in a stream or river naturally over time, so we need water. Don't run your tumbler dry, that's a terrible idea. But these also need a little help along. So we're going to add in some tumbling media. This is silicon carbide grit, this is coarse grain. So let me explain the process to you real quick. We start off with water in the tumbler. We start off with a coarse grain media. Think of it like sanding wood. You start with a really coarse sandpaper and you work your way down to a medium and then a fine and then maybe say an ultra fine or whatever. It's the same concept only with rocks. So right here I've got coarse grain silicon carbide. I'm going to put in, it depends on the tumbler size, but in this case I'm going to put in a couple of tablespoons of it. And this will help get everything nice and whatever. Like I said, this is coarse grain. We're going to sprinkle in, that's probably a bit much actually. Nope, need more. I always kind of eyeball it myself, because it's just how I am. I do the same thing with cooking. General rule of thumb, a couple tablespoons for a tumbler this size. Alright, get on in there. Very nice. Okay, next up, we're going to start tumbling. But first, again, like I said, I like to run two tangent tumbles because I like to combine the two together on the latter phases. You usually get through phase 2 or stage 2 before really needing to do something like this, but if you can't do this or you don't have a second tumbler, what you can do is buy either ceramic beads or plastic filler beads. Personally, I'm not a huge fan because they don't give the most consistent tumble in my opinion, but yeah, it's a smaller barrel, so that will be good. Be right back. Gotta fill this up. Oh no! Now, this process takes typically 4 weeks, 4+ weeks. Yeah, so this process usually takes about 4 weeks. A week for the initial stage. I sometimes will go a week and a half on the initial stage if I don't quite like the shape. Most of your shaping is going to be done in the first 2 phases. So if you don't like quite where they're at on the first phase, just let it go for a little bit longer or add in some additional grit. But that's the general rule of thumb. And then you've got a week for the medium grit, and then a week for the fine grit. And then from there, you could either do a week for a polishing media, or a week for, say, like a pre-polish, like Tripoli, and then a polishing media. And then usually half a day or so, I will clean everything out and put soap in it. Speaking of cleaning, that's very important. Between phases, and we'll talk about this as we go, it's extremely important to make sure that your tumbler is cleaned, completely cleaned between phases. Because if even a tiny little bit of that coarse grain is left over, in the next phase, it can contaminate your polish. And really just give you no good polish, because it's just re-scratching stuff. That's how this works, is you scratch with hard stuff, thick stuff, working down to scratching it with tiny stuff, and then tinier scratches, and tinier scratches, and tinier scratches, until it is a polish. Until it is a polish. Yep. We're going to get these bad boys going, and we will check in tomorrow for the first major check. It is extremely important, again, in my opinion, and also from experience, to open up your tumbler after the first 24 hours. After that, you don't need to check every day. After that, you can just let it run for the entire week. It's a very hands-off process overall. But after the first day, you always want to check, because there's usually some organic material, dust, other stuff that's kind of sort of on the rocks, and as it tumbles, that can cause a gaseous buildup. So after the first day, you want to open it up, release that gas, close it back up, and then let it keep going. Some additional advice as well: if you like tumblers, but you're not super interested in the sound that they make, the different types of tumblers that you can get can really affect this. These are both rubber barrels for two different types of tumblers. One of them is a brand that I don't remember. It's an older tumbler, and the other one is a Tumbler's tumbler. They are very good. Lortone produces a fantastic tumbler, and they use hard rubber barrels, which really help with the sound. You'll still hear it, don't get me wrong, you will still hear it. But it's not going to be like a National Geographic tumbler or something like that uses a hard plastic barrel and you can hear it from 6 states away. This will be much more manageable. So you could put it, say, in a garage, or you could put it in a room that you don't frequent or something like that and not be driven absolutely insane by it. So let's get these bad boys going, and we will check in tomorrow.